Welcome back now for the news in detail. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan will always stand by the Kashmiri people in Indian-occupied Kashmir. He said Pakistan is supporting Kashmiris because they are being oppressed by India. We have more details in this report. Prime Minister Imran Khan has once again reiterated Pakistan's unequivocal support for the Kashmir cause. Addressing a crowd at the Islamabad International Airport after arriving from the US, Khan said Kashmiris will be successful in their struggle for freedom. Khan said India has kept 8 million people trapped under a curfew since the 5th of August.
We are standing with the Kashmiris because they are facing oppression. The Indian forces have trapped 8 million people under a curfew in occupied Kashmir.
The Prime Minister said every Kashmiri is looking to Pakistan and its people. He went on to say that Islamabad will expose the fascist government in India on every platform.
I told you, I am the ambassador of Kashmir. I will keep exposing this fascist Modi government, this Muslim Hadi government on every international platform.
Banners and posters highlighting the plight of Kashmiris who have been under a lockdown for the last 56 days were put up at the airport. Pakistan says India is being run on the principles of terrorism, racism and xenophobia under the garb of a sham democracy. In Pakistan's first right for reply, UN Representative Zulkarnain Cheena rebutted New Delhi's response to Prime Minister Imran Khan's speech at the UN General Assembly. Cheena said India was accusing Pakistan of terrorism despite the fact that its spy was caught in Pakistan and confessed to terrorism and espionage. It said India claimed Article 370 was revoked for Kashmir's development, but the valley has been under curfew for the last 2 months. Cheena questioned why India is not letting Kashmiris speak their minds and let the world know about their plight.
A country which is in the iron grip of the fascist RSS, which was thrice banned in India for terror-related charges, has the audacity to point fingers towards others.
It said India does not have the moral courage to respond to the UN's report on human rights abuses in the occupied valley. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan's speech is being celebrated in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Kashmiri defied New Delhi's curfew with firecrackers, cheering and chanting slogans after Khan advocated for their cause at the UN General Assembly. The speech convinced Kashmiris they are not alone and abandoned by the world. The people of the Indian-occupied valley were overjoyed that their voice was heard at the highest international forum. Indian activist Sheila Rashid said there were rallies, firecrackers and celebrations after Imran Khan's speech at the UN. On Twitter, Kashmiris living abroad confirmed the report, saying Khan has given the caged people of the valley a reason to smile. New Delhi's communications blackout has entered its 56th consecutive day now. With no trade deal and no diplomatic win on the Kashmir issue, the Indian media has slammed Prime Minister Modi for his failed US visit. In a report, Indian media outlet The Print wrote, despite pomp and propaganda, Modi did not achieve anything in New York. The report said the Indian Prime Minister scored a clear nil on the most contentious trade issues during his week-long America visit. Mentioning occupied Kashmir, the report said Modi could not extract much from Trump, who kept on repeating his offer of mediation on Kashmir. It said even Washington has called on New Delhi to rapidly ease restrictions in the valley. It mentioned Trump asked Modi to meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. Now moving on, over 1 million votes cast in Afghanistan's presidential elections have been counted. Observers say the elections were marred by low turnout, violence, technical glitches and voter fraud. The Afghan Defense Ministry says 5 security personnel were killed and 37 civilians wounded in 68 attacks during Saturday's presidential polls. More details. Millions of Afghans went to the polls to elect the war-torn country's new leader. The election was postponed twice due to peace talks between the Taliban and the US in Doha. More than 70,000 security personnel were deployed across the country to counter the Taliban, who had threatened to target polling stations. This was the fourth presidential election in Afghanistan since 2001. Voters hope the election will bring peace to the country after decades of conflict.
All the Afghan people, including myself, long for real peace to be realized in our country. I am full of expectations of my candidate. I believe he has got great plans for pushing forward the peace process and bringing peace back to this nation.
Some voters say the new president should focus on education and infrastructure development.
For the future leader, become a good country, a developed country, and should bring the peace for us. For those that there are more educations, more constructions. Yeah, this is our expectation from our coming leaders.
18 candidates, including President Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah Abdullah, are vying for the top slot. The Election Commission of Afghanistan is expected to announce the results in 3 weeks. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Hamdullah Hamdard, a Kabul-based political analyst. Thank you, Mr. Hamdard, for your time. So please tell us, independent observers say the Afghan presidential elections is marred by low turnout, violence, technical glitches and voter fraud. So, Mr. Hamdard, don't these allegations damage the credibility of the election?
Well, first of all, as one of the voters that I went to the polling stations, I voted. The biometric was used, and I didn't see any fraud. And I guess these allegations are baseless, and usually such allegations are from the people who consider themselves as independent, but they're not independent. They are representing someone, especially the ones who will fail and who will lose the elections. I guess the technical glitches, there were some small glitches. These small technical glitches cannot damage the credibility of the elections considerably.
And what about peace in post-election Afghanistan, as peace dialogues between the United States and Taliban stopped and the insurgents announced attacks?
One of the most important statements that Dr. Ghani was giving in his campaigns, that was about the peace and restarting the peace negotiations with the Taliban. Of course, there will be some conditions, and Taliban will have to show some flexibility, reduce the violence, and stop escalating the violence in the country. Plus, the US will get Taliban to the negotiating table with the Afghan government, with the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, because this peace process will have to be led on by the Afghan government in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan.
Right, Hamdullah Hamdard, thank you for joining us on Indus News. Now moving on to Hong Kong, where police fired tear gas and pepper spray to break up protesters in a busy shopping district. Heavy contingents of police were deployed after a night of violence. Police arrested several protesters after they started staging demonstrations from Causeway Bay to Admiralty. Earlier, police issued a tear gas warning for pedestrians after clashes in Admiralty yesterday. An online group, Stand with Hong Kong, called for demonstrations in at least 72 cities across the world. Today's rally marks the 17th consecutive weekend of anti-government protests since June. Now, in Egypt, security forces have killed 15 suspected militants in a shootout in the northern Sinai region. Egypt's Interior Ministry said the militants were planning terror attacks on the military and police to destabilize national security. It said militants were hiding in a farm in El Arish. Earlier, 9 soldiers were killed and 1 wounded in counter-terrorism operations in the region. Meanwhile, Israeli security forces have detained 8 Palestinians in early morning raids in the southern West Bank. Palestinian officials said Israeli soldiers detained 6 men during a raid in Dura town. They said the forces also detained 2 men, including a teenager, in Idna town. Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers removed several Palestinian and international activists holding a non-violent sit-in near the shore of northern Dead Sea by force. The activists were protesting against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's pledge to annex the West Bank. Palestinian officials said several people were injured during the raid. In Austria, polling in snap parliamentary elections has ended following the collapse of the coalition government in May. Opinion polls show former Chancellor Sebastian Kurz's People's Party is leading by roughly one-third of the vote. But Kurz still needs a coalition partner to secure the majority, and it remains unclear whom they will pick. Kurz's election campaign focused on a Judeo-Christian identity. The country is currently being governed by a non-partisan caretaker government of technocrats. The coalition with the far-right Freedom Party fell apart after a video stink scandal. The scandal was labeled Ibiza Gate after the Spanish island where the video was recorded. In Israel, negotiations for a unity government between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and rival candidate Benny Gantz have broken down. Both of them blame each other for the failure of the talks. The Likud party said Netanyahu will make a last effort to reach a deal before informing President Reuven Rivlin. The Blue and White Party has accused Likud of adopting methods to gain support for another poll at Netanyahu's behest. In case of a no deal, President Rivlin will decide either to invite Gantz to form the government or ask Parliament to vote for a prime minister. Thousands of Russians rallied in Moscow to demand the release of protesters prosecuted in recent months. They were arrested during demonstrations against the exclusion of opposition candidates from a local election. Opponents of President Vladimir Putin say arrests were part of a campaign to stifle dissent. Several people were sentenced to up to 4 years, and others are being prosecuted for crimes such as violence against police officers. Following the outcry, courts freed one person on bail and dropped charges against another. But President Vladimir Putin's opponents say the moves may be a tactic to avoid wider concessions. Sunday's rallies were authorized by Moscow's mayor's office. It's time for a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has vowed to stay in power even if he fails to secure a deal to leave the European Union. In an interview, Johnson said only his government can deliver Brexit by the 31st of October. Time is running out for the UK to avoid a potentially chaotic departure from the EU, which many fear could hurt the economy. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said there are hurdles, but he wants to leave the EU at any cost.
Undertaken to lead the party in my country at a difficult time, and I'm going to continue to do that. I believe it's my responsibility to do that, and I think that it's our job to get Brexit done on October the 31st.
The Prime Minister said the United Kingdom must get rid of the so-called Irish backstop. The Irish backstop is the key sticking point in the Brexit negotiations. Brexit party leader Nigel Farage says he will run for a seat in Britain's parliament in any upcoming election. Farage's party won the EU parliamentary elections in May. The UK has landed in a deadlock over Brexit with the European Union after heated debates in its parliament. As impasse continues, a new election is widely expected before the end of the year. An anti-Islamophobia event in the southern German city of Ulm was the scene of a violent attack by a man wielding a knife. The event was organized by one of the largest Muslim NGOs of Germany, the IGMG. Event organizers said a man shouted, "I will kill you Muslims," in English, and tried to attack women taking part in the event with a knife. They added no one got hurt in the incident. Organizers said police have taken the attacker into custody and started an investigation. Now, Syria has demanded the immediate withdrawal of US and Turkish troops from the country. the United States has around 1,000 troops tackling ISIS militants in Syria. Addressing the UN General Assembly, Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim said Syria has the right to take action if the US and Turkey refuse to withdraw troops. Washington and Ankara have started joint land and air patrols along a part of Syria's border with Turkey to establish a safe zone. Al-Muallim said there should be no deadlines for a UN-mediated constitution committee formed to find a settlement to the civil war. He said the Syrian people should lead and own the process. Clashes between government forces and pro-democracy protesters led Syria into civil war in 2011. Meanwhile, Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has urged the US to remove Khartoum from its list of states sponsoring terrorism. Speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, he said Sudan is entering a new phase after the toppling of dictator Omar al-Bashir in April. Hamdok said the sanctions imposed by Washington are causing tremendous suffering to the Sudanese people. He assured the General Assembly that the new Sudan is not a threat to any nation. Sudan was designated a state sponsor of terrorism in 1993 under then U.S. President Bill Clinton. The designation makes the country ineligible for debt relief and funding from international institutions, also limiting foreign investment. 36 people have been killed and several others injured after a bus crashed into a truck in China. The bus was carrying 69 people when the accident happened on an expressway in Jiangsu province. Police said the bus broke through the barrier dividing the two lanes on a motorway. They said an initial investigation suggests the accident was caused by a burst tire. Out of the 36 people injured, 9 were rushed to hospital after their conditions was declared critical. 44 people have been killed in flooding following torrential rains in India's northern Uttar Pradesh state. Officials say thousands of others have moved to the relief camps in view of more heavy rains predicted for next 48 hours. Densely populated regions on banks of the state's two main rivers were worst hit. Officials said most people lost their lives in incidents of house collapse, drowning, lightning and snake bites. Earlier this week, flash floods killed at least 17 people in western India's Maharashtra state. 2 people have been killed after a roller coaster carriage derailed in Mexico City. Officials say 5 others were injured in the accident at a popular amusement park. According to an eyewitness, the victims fell to the ground when the last carriage came off the tracks. The popular park was closed soon after the incident. Authorities are now investigating the cause of the derailment. The UN's refugee agency says a boat carrying over 50 migrants has capsized off coast of Libya in the Mediterranean Sea. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees said a rescue operation is underway to save the refugees. Meanwhile, Alarm Phone, an independent support group, said another boat carrying nearly 60 migrants went missing in the same area. They said the migrants were hoping to cross the Mediterranean Sea to reach Europe. Last week, the EU partnered with the Coast Guard and other Libyan forces to stop the dangerous sea crossings. Now in Turkey, women's rights activists have taken to the streets in Istanbul against the government's failure to stop rising violence against women. The protest started after the murder of Emin Berlut by her former husband last month. Protest organizers said the killing of women has spiked over the last few months. According to a rights group, 294 women were murdered in Turkey in the first 8 months of this year. 440 women were killed last year. Turkey has ratified the Council of Europe's 2011 Istanbul Convention on Preventing Domestic Violence. The famed San Francisco chocolatier Barry Callebaut has created a new way of making chocolate using not just the beans, but the whole cocoa fruit. His company says its new chocolate trend is tastier, nutritious and fruitier. We have more details in this chocolatey report.
Chefs at world's largest cocoa producers, Barry Callebaut, love creating delicious chocolates that not only delight the eye, but also the palate. In the modern age, consumers want to use whole grains, less sugar, more nutrients, and cause less harm to the environment. The chocolatier unveiled a new chocolate line called Whole Fruit Chocolate that packs in cocoa beans and also parts of the fruit tossed away earlier. The Calabo CEO, Antonio Decent, said 70% of cacao fruit is discarded as waste while making chocolate.
The sugar comes from the fruit, from the pulp of the fruit. The structure comes with the fibers. The taste comes, of course, from the cocoa beans. So it's a chocolate that's made only 100% from the fruit itself.
Pour savoir ce qu'on pouvait en faire.
The new chocolate line will come in two types, one consisting of 100% cacao and another mixing in milk with no refined sugar added.
I'm a dark chocolate person, and I think this went 100 times more than a regular.
Decent said the company is looking forward to offering new recipes to Nestle, Hershey, and Unilever.
Famous landmarks and buildings have been decked with lights across China. This is to mark the upcoming 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic on 1st of October.
In Beijing, the National Stadium, the National Aquatics Center and the Great Wall were lit up with slogans and images. The city of Harbin in northeast Heilongjiang province also put up a spectacular light show. In Tianjin, streets and buildings along the river bank were decorated with colorful lights for the National Day. In Jinan City, capital of eastern Shandong province, 923 buildings were lit up by LED lights. The Potala Palace in Lhasa city was majestic as striking beams of light illuminated the centuries-old fortress on the top of the Red Hill.
Now let's have a look at the weather update. Well, that's all for now. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.